Ms. Hale, Ms. Holland, Ms. Reyes, Ms. Sullivan.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hello, everybody. Got a big packed room here. So excited. We are going to start out with some presentations. Oh, I'm sorry, public comments. We now open the floor to public comments for agenda items. Does anyone have any public comments they want to make tonight? Okay, that's usually how it goes. So we're going to move on to presentations now.
Wonderful. We have two presentations this evening, but I think what you're all here to see and experience is our student growth celebration. Favorite meetings of the school year because it's my absolute honor, joy, and privilege to recognize some truly exceptional students, those who demonstrated the most growth from fall to spring on their academic assessments in English language arts, Spanish language arts, and math. While test scores can be one piece of the picture, what we're celebrating tonight is much bigger. It's perseverance, grit, a growth mindset, and the power of hard work over time. These students didn't just show up, they rose to the challenge. They leaned in with determination, believed in their potential, and kept going even when their path wasn't easy. Their growth is a testament to their determination, courage, commitment, and also all of the family and friends support that they have at home. To our students, your growth shows us that learning isn't about where you start, it's about how far you're willing to go. We are so proud of you, and we hope you feel proud of yourselves. To our teachers and families that are here tonight, thank you for nurturing, guiding, inspiring, and loving these students every step of the way. Please join me in celebrating these outstanding learners. Their growth is a shining example of what's possible when we level up, lean in, and sparkle on. We are going to give them a round of applause all at the end. I'm going to have each one of the principals and Dr. Berger come up and recognize the students and their name, their grade level, and then what subject area they made the most growth in. We have certificates for them that we're going to take one giant picture, and then we will all applaud and celebrate and recognize them. So thank you again for coming tonight. And if I can have Mrs. Morley come on up and announce the students from Diamond Lake.
All right, our first student is Francisco Reyes in kindergarten for the Math Star Assessment. Come on up. We have, oh, wait till the end. Come on over. Ashley Duarte Darris in kindergarten for the early literacy test in English. So come on up, Ashley. Advik Kali, come on up. That's for the early literacy, Spanish, and reading in English. Come on up in kindergarten. Jose Hurtado in first grade for the early literacy test. Come on up, Jose. Aaliyah Aggie Parker, first grade reading test. Josiah Butler for the first grade math test. Leonardo Guzman Silva for the Spanish early literacy test. Sebastian Pacheco, first grade reading in Spanish. Nathaniel Sittler, second grade reading assessment. Ureli Figueroa Delgado, second grade early literacy assessment. Oops, sorry. I'm too fast for you. All right, Ureli, come on. Nathan Cabrado, second grade reading Spanish. Guillermo Lara, second grade, early literacy Spanish. And then Miguel Huerta, second grade math. And those are our representatives from Diamond Lake School. Let's give them a round. All right.
My students aren't here in the doorway. There's a way we can get them in more.
Okay.
I know. I don't see Daniel Bonilla though. Hi. How are you? Did you just come to show us your dress? Oh, thank you. We love it. Yeah, it's very sparkly. Thank you. She's so cute.
She wanted to show it.
Okay, students that showed the most growth at West Oak Intermediate School for third grade in reading, Daniel Bonilla. Is Daniel here? I didn't think so. Okay. In Spanish, Quinn, come on up. And in math, Carter, come on up. Good job, girl. Way to go. Awesome. Fourth grade for reading, Chris, come on up. For Spanish, Julian, come on up. And math was Alex Rivera. I don't see Alex in the audience tonight, though. Oh, you snuck by. Oh, good. I didn't see you. Hi. Congrats, buddy. Okay, fifth grade for reading, Vlad. Is he here tonight? No? Okay, let's give Vlad a round of applause. Thanks for keeping track for me. Spanish, Anthony. And for math, Brandon. It doesn't look like Brandon's here either. Yeah. Alrighty.
All right, Mr. Hanson, work your magic. All right, you guys.
Okay, last but not least, the greatest scores or greatest achievers here at the West Oak Middle School. Sixth grade, the highest scorer was Ali Caballero. Come on up, Ali. Yes, and then we also have reading. Reading was Autumn Moore. Come on over, Autumn. Congratulations. And then also our reading, Spanish reading was, he's not here today, but Charlie Swanson. At the seventh grade, we have in math was Joseph Cross. Right. I don't believe we saw with reading here. I don't believe Julian Reynoso. I don't believe he's here today. Correct. Nope. All right. Platform anyways. And then with reading Spanish was Natalie Sack Gonzalez. Good hustle. All right. Eighth grade, they're back. I know they just graduated, but I'm sure they just couldn't wait to come back here. But with math, our greatest grower was Sophia Lopez. Nana? Reading was Mr. Jonathan Balderas Sotelo. All right. And then reading in Spanish was Mr. Abraham Carmona. Come on up. Okay. Welcome back, Zach. We go two. Do we go two lines or you scrunch?
All right, that concludes our student growth presentations for the evening. We do have an assessment update, but families and friends, thank you so much for coming. We hope you're enjoying your summer. We hope you have a great rest of the summer. Thank you for all the support, love, and nurturing that you give our students to make this growth. We're really proud of them. Congratulations. And if people would like to leave, you are welcome to. Otherwise, we're going to start out with our student assessment presentations with Dr. Berger and Dr. Cunningham. There you go. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Nicely done.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you, honey. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Both a year. Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Our goal tonight is to be both informative and to be speak with some brevity. So hopefully we accomplish at least one and not zero. So our goal is to give you both those things tonight. So one of the ways that we're going to do that is normally the principals will speak when it comes to their schools. We're actually going to have it. So I'm going to share an introduction and some important data, things that are just updates. Dr. Berger is going to share the building-based data and then some of the celebrations and rationale for why we think we're seeing what we're seeing. And then I'll share some of the next steps and things that we're doing. So the first piece is that just for the board's sake, that those goals and priorities we use in priority one, really we're looking at letter A, which is utilizing our multi-tiered systems of support so that our measurable evidence is that 100% of our kindergarten to 8th grade students demonstrate growth on STAR, and growth in this case is referring to 1 point of their score, not percentage point, but a literal point is the way we've defined that in terms of what we present to the board. We also have 3 tiers of instruction. This is a local decision. So we made this decision of what these cut scores would be back in about 2017, 2018. 30th percentile and above would be considered tier 1 or at grade level, tier 2, 29th to 12th, and then tier 3, the 11th or below. And we give the STAR test 3 times a year as kind of our benchmark test of where we may be. What I do want to start with tonight is in the winter, for those board members that remember, we shared out that STAR released its first ever dual language study where they ran programs from 2nd to 6th grade of all different varieties. They tried to find as many as they could and then decided to kind of set the norms, just really the trends of what students in dual programs were showing. And they really just looked at 2, they just looked at English and Spanish dual language, so not English Russian, not English Chinese. They were looking at English Spanish, which is very relevant to what we offer here. It makes a lot of sense. We do have 23 languages in our district right now that represent the EL program. The vast majority are Spanish. They're the only one we have over 20 kids. We have 369 EL students, so no other population gets to 20 students to move us to a next level of things that we offer. So Spanish is a big deal. This was just a slide that I updated from the winter that explains what the study was, and that they literally 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks ago, launched the dual language they call it a biliteracy trajectory of how, so it's kind of nice for the first time we can, instead of saying to school boards across the country, dual programs work, trust us. Now we can say, here's the data to show what's happening with our dual language program students. And it's interesting and relevant even to this board. We were thinking about this. I think 100% of our board members have kids in the dual program. So that's interesting. So has an extra bit of relevance. So this graph is not our kids. I left it in here just to kind of give a visual really to the new board members. These are like these fall, winter, spring scores of all the different groups. Home language English, taking the reading test. Home language Spanish, taking the English test. Home language English, taking the Spanish test. And home language Spanish, taking the Spanish. Or actually, they should say home language Spanish. They have a typo in their own report. So then I drew this red line across because that shows you where our interventions typically would start. And if you see that home language Spanish speakers in dual programs, their median score is way below intervention line. So we talk about closing gaps. It was important to think about that. But we did, for the first time, run our data through this. So STAR uses something, MAP does not use this for those that know MAP. STAR uses something they call the grade equivalent. And this was just an easy way for me to plug in some of our numbers versus the national. So what this graph is showing is, and this is a graph from the winter, it's showing how kids did in their home languages across the country. And then in red, I added us. So I'll use 4th grade, for example. So in the darker blue on the left, that's a home language English student in a dual program taking the reading test. Nationally, they score in 4th grade at an early 5th grade level. Okay, in our district, they score at an 8th grade beginning level, 8.0. Okay, and a home language English speaker on the Spanish reading test tends to score a late 2nd grade. At this point, they would be scoring a 4.8, would be considered grade level. In our district, we score 3.5. So we're a grade level head nationally. If you look at our Spanish speakers, they're just a tick above. Really, if you watch our Spanish across the board, they pretty much stay just above the national average, which is great. So you can see our Spanish speakers sit at a late 4th grade level in English, and then are in Spanish, excuse me. And then on the English side, our Spanish speakers are about 0.5 back of where you would want to test if you're exactly at a grade equivalent. And when I say grade equivalent, here's what I mean. I forgot to say that, I apologize. It's basically saying that you're testing like a typical student would at that grade level. It doesn't mean you can do that content. If you were to look at 5th grade, for example, we have this wildly high one where our English speakers are testing like a typical senior in high school for those that take STAR all the way through. That STAR has 35,000 districts. So all the kids that are seniors in high school that take this test, our kids are testing like a typical senior. Now, you might have a 5th grader and say, what is wrong with the seniors in this country? But this is where they land. So you can see our English speakers really accelerate all the way through. At the 6th grade level, that's where the study ends. Our English speakers in the dual language program test exactly at grade level where they should be for Spanish. Late 6th grade is where they should be testing, and that's where they hit. But you can watch our Spanish speakers. This is important when we think about achievement gaps. Even for our Spanish speakers period, when we talk about this and for our EL population, the gaps, you can see our Spanish speakers tested at early 5th grade level. What the goal would be for grade equivalent perfect match would be a 6.8 is where they would be. So this matches our data very good. We're just really excited this study exists now. So this data is really fresh. So it looks this way. It hasn't, Eric Hansen has not come in and make it look really nice. So you're getting the Dr. Cunningham version, which is like clip art on top of, it's this, another example of that. Hansen's got much nicer looking ones. These numbers you'll see later, and Dr. Berger will share them. But what I try to do here is now the percentiles also change in the dual language study. So let's say I was in the 15th percentile intervention, and I'm a native Spanish speaker, I'm in a dual program. When I get compared to other Spanish speakers taking the English reading test, I actually jump to the 38th percentile. So I actually come out of intervention, if you want to think of it that way. So it makes things clearer and muddier at the same time. So you're like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. But wait, the kid still doesn't have the skill. So we still have to think about making sure they learn it. But should they get pulled out for intervention, or do they need to be in the dual program when we push it? Those are the kinds of things we start talking about and what we do. So this is showing you what our numbers will look like in the next part of the presentation. If I flip the slide, you watch what happens when I added in the dual trajectory. So let's pick a grade here. Let's pick maybe 6th grade, 57 in tier 1, 16 and 8. If I change it, it goes 65, 10 and 6. So you can see all those kids move out of intervention because if I use the dual language trajectory. In Spanish, you're going to see these numbers later, so I'm not going to necessarily spend time on it. This one's actually closer, which makes sense. When you add our dual trajectory in, there isn't a lot of change. But if I use 6th grade, 32, 2 and 1, it goes 34, 1 and 0. So we have nobody in tier 3 Spanish. But our Spanish numbers have always been very good, and they continue to be. It's very exciting, this data initially, because it shows that our dual program is very, very good. Our students that are in our dual program are doing very well, and we really are very excited about it. Additionally, I shared this out as implications in the winter, and I kind of kept a lot of this, that our dual language students match or outperform nationally. We have a very high interest in where the Illinois report card is going to go, because right now, if you want to think of it, our dual trajectory, our Spanish speakers really are on a long range trajectory. So are we doing things to be aggressive to help them catch quicker? Absolutely. But if we look at how we're measured in IR, for example, 3rd and 4th grade, especially for our native Spanish speakers, they're getting measured at grade level, and they're not at that point yet, if that makes sense. So we're very interested in this because what the state wants to do is give points to schools that have dual language programs to compensate for some of that. You can still pull up some of your charts and you'll read the way it does, but in terms of the overall school scores, it boosts schools that run dual programs. So we're very interested in that. We also are using FastBridge. That's a new product we introduced this year in progress monitoring that's letting us take kids that maybe didn't do so well on STAR and English that are a Spanish speaker, and we can check their Spanish skills in all these different areas, and we see they're actually extraordinarily high in Spanish. That helps us figure out, it helps us answer this question. Is the student presenting a reading deficit, or are they simply acquiring a new language? That's really the question we ask as we work with our students in the dual program. And then we're going to probably revamp the way we share out with the board. We'll want feedback from the board. Dr. Noel will take that feedback for the next presentation in November of what we might need to be putting in these presentations or not, moving forward, what makes sense. The other piece I want to share is an intro. It's just Tony Sanders put this into the Illinois Association of School Administrators that it's really for school boards to be informed that there is a narrative right now of Illinois lowering the bar for their test scores. And really what's happening is Illinois set their standards higher than the College Board's recommendation of what is college ready. Illinois made their cut scores harder. So Illinois is going to adjust that because what the national narrative has been is Illinois is one of the lowest in reading and math, even though when they take that National Assessment of Educational Progress, they come out higher. Other states will say we're doing so well in reading, but it's not apples to apples and how it's compared. And so what happens is Illinois outperforms other states nationally, but it's considered failing. I gave an example in our district on STAR. A majority of our kids are proficient in reading and in math. And I'm not including dual language measures, just the normal national. Majority are. But in IAR, that drops us significantly because the cut score moves so much higher that our students get caught in that, except for our top performers. So this is just a graphic that Tony Sanders put out to the IASA that just shows comparison Illinois to Connecticut to Florida. It shows Illinois considers just that, I was looking at the bar graphs, that Illinois considers this the two greens as proficient. Florida will give you the yellow on top of it and says that's proficient too for us. And well, if we put our yellow in, we're way ahead of Florida, but we don't consider that proficient. And so other states will give a narrative, and Connecticut doesn't even measure it that way. Totally different. So this is really not about, this part is not about us. This is just to give the board an FYI as the community may talk about these things. The newspapers pick these up, that we're changing scores or whatever we're just having too many kids that are in 3 AP classes and all these different clubs getting scholarships that are considered failing all the way through their senior year of high school. So that we're trying to adjust that. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Berger to talk about the data.
Thank you, Dr. Cunningham. Fantastic job.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, to start out, looking at the different components of the STAR assessment, we want to take a look at DLS first. Because this is the early childhood testing system, it does the ELI assessment in 2 different components. One can be early literacy foundational skills, which is generally always given in kindergarten, usually also with first grade as they progress into reading by the end of the year. And then a lot of times what we see is that sometimes we'll have students in second grade still doing the early literacy piece, but again, by the end of the year, getting closer and closer to the reading piece. So when we look at the early literacy, it's talking all about these foundational skills of the alphabet, phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and comprehension, versus taking all of those foundational skills and then applying them in reading, such as author, literary, argument, vocabulary, comprehension. More of actually reading pieces and being able to answer questions regarding them. So when we take a look at ELA for DLS, they did a great job. What you'll see here is we had 97% growth in early literacy, and 100% of the students who actually were ready to take the reading showed growth also. And one of the important pieces to remember when we're looking at these results is that you're looking at the number of students that scored in each of these tiers from the fall compared to the spring. And remembering that our students could have made growth, but could have changed to a different tier. So for example, if a student, let's say, had a raw score of 500 in the fall, they scored in tier 1. In the spring, they had a raw score of 505. They technically showed an increase of 5 points, but according to STAR, it may not have been enough to keep them in tier 1 because STAR projects they should have grown to a raw score, let's say, of 510. So when we look at the difference with the tier pieces, it doesn't always mean that a child regressed. It just might mean, again, that it wasn't enough growth according to STAR. So whenever we count this percentage, we count every single student, even if they just grew by 1 point in the raw score, because it is showing an advancement in the child's abilities. This was our math scores for DLS, 99% of our students moving ahead in math, which is absolutely great. And this was our second year with our new math curriculum Envisions that the kids absolutely love across the entire district. And they have many more experiences of hands-on and different manipulatives and things like that at the younger grades. This was for Spanish in kindergarten. 95% of our kids only took the early literacy assessment for this. Many of the things that we see, especially in kindergarten, when it comes to Spanish language arts and the development of skills, even if the children are Spanish speakers at home, it's not formal Spanish like it is here in school. It's very conversational, sometimes of a different dialect, sometimes of a different cut or clip of words in comparison to what they're learning here. So we generally keep just with the early literacy at the kindergarten level. And then when we take a look at first and second grade in comparison, again, we're seeing huge growth, 100% in first grade, whether it was ELA or reading, no matter what assessment they took, 94% in second grade. And Ms. Morley put it into effect this year that all students would take the second grade reading by the end of the year so that they would have some baseline data as they enter WOIS and before starting third grade. And then first and second grade for math was 100% across the board. So every single student within those two grade levels had also shown growth. And for Spanish, it was 94% in first grade and 100% in second. And again, this was looking at the transition of the number of students that were actually at that level of being able to take that reading assessment. So huge growth across DLS, great early childhood development skills in all three subjects. For WOIS, this is taking a look at third grade as we compare the ELA scores. And we talked about this a little bit in the winter when we look at third and fourth compared to fifth grade. This is our COVID group. This is the ones they were in kindergarten when COVID happened. And it was a very difficult transition back into school. There was so much lost classroom time, as we know. There was a lot of time that just we needed to make up for. And in many cases in fifth grade too, there were students that also had IEPs as a result of COVID, that I'm proud to say many of them are now off of those IEPs and exiting all of that, getting into middle school, because of course now we're much more back in the swing of things to have the data to show that it was not a developmental delay of any kind or a disability, it was COVID. So we are continuing to work and improve with that grade level. And then this was math across the board for third, fourth, and fifth, showing some great growth there. And Spanish scores as well across the building. And then for our middle school, this was unbelievable growth as well. And one of the things we had also talked about in the winter is we were very meticulous with middle school this year, making sure that our children were taking the time to answer the questions and not rushing through things, and making sure they were really reading the questions carefully. Our middle school staff also did a great job of test prep for our students and really getting them excited and motivated. Beginning of May, you know, like in 8th grade, STAR might not be our number one favorite thing to do, but they did an absolutely great job. The teachers, Brandon, everybody really motivated the kids to do their very best. So this was our growth for ELA. These were scores for Spanish across the middle school, and then also for math. So some of the great things that we accomplished this year that we want to celebrate is that we had a completely revamp of our professional learning communities, especially at West Oak campus. We were very meticulous about making sure that our teams were meeting on a regular basis. They were looking at data, they were making data-driven decisions, and that we had a purpose with everything that we did. We also completed our unit plans for guaranteed and viable curriculum for the foundational work that we need to do with that for our school improvements. Also making sure that teachers were consistently using their learning targets, so students were fully informed of what they were learning, why they were learning it, and how they were going to be assessed. Our interventionists also began to shift their practice with using different tools to be able to progress monitor and thinking about the reading deficits that we had and why, and how we would be able to service those students. Teachers were also getting training in vocabulary, specifically with things that had to do with the standardized assessment piece, so that as we were preparing everyone for IAR, Our teachers knew exactly what those different terms meant because it changes each year. One year it might have said, give the answer. This year it said something like, what's your response? So it's changing all of that different type of vocabulary to make sure that our kids were ready. We also were complete with our instructional rounds, observing the effective teaching practices that were happening in the classrooms, our coaches stepping in and providing a lot of support to teams, individual teachers during PLCs, all of that great work. And then, of course, the standards-based report card that we love. Everyone does.
Especially Rhonda.
Absolutely. And with that, I will turn it back to the one and only.
We all know, if you were at the end of your gala, you know Rhonda Curley especially is a huge fan of it.
Yes.
There's been such great work. We've learned a lot of things about test prep as well and preparing that our students really, we talk about what is like closing gaps and being aggressive with things. A lot of our students, especially as they get to the upper grades, lack a lot of the vocabulary that gets used in the reading passages, that gets used in the questions that are being asked as the rigor increases. And so we have to be extraordinarily intentional from younger grades on. And we'll talk about that in a moment. These two graphs were at the request of the board a couple years ago, and we keep trying to find different ways to present it. The last one seemed to have landed decently, so we went for it again this spring. So the question was about achievement for our students that are in the top percentiles. How many students do we have? How are they doing? So what this is showing is the number of students, or excuse me, the percent of students in the 75th to 99th percentile from fall to spring. So if I was to take third grade, for example, in the fall, 2% of our third graders were in the 75th to 89th percentile. Once you hit the 75th, you are considered typically, this is kind of the first measure we would use to consider advanced programming, which starts in third grade, which is why you're seeing it in third, also because the early lit comes out at this point. So you can see in the spring, 15, that's at the biggest of all the grades, 15% of our students were testing in that range. And so a number of them, they're recommended by their teacher to move into the advanced program and potentially for the following year. In the 90th percentile, 5.6 and then 9%. And keep in mind in our district, kids represent multiple percentage points. So one kid is 2% or 3% or 1.5% typically. So on the right side, you can see that essentially we went up in all of our percentages of students that are in the advanced program. We are averaging basically between the 21st and 30th percentile essentially. Sorry, 21 to 30% of our students qualify for advanced programming is what we're looking at. Anywhere we went down is usually we just traded a kid from the, maybe they're in the 89th and they went to the 90th and they went to the 87th. So they traded over in terms of why there's red there, but at the end, also in some of these scenarios, really it could just be enrollment change. In 7th grade, we went up 0.5. We don't have that many kids to do that. So it means our enrollment probably shifted. So, but we're still showing it in the green because it makes us feel good. We like that. But we showed that on this slide too, as well as math. So you can see we started this one in kindergarten. What's impressive is in kindergarten is kindergartners are normed based on first grade standards. So that means we have 23% of our kindergartners are testing in the top 25% of first grade is what that's saying. So very interesting when we think about it that way. You can see we held even in second. 4th grade, we went down 0.9. You could argue that's not even a kid. We actually had a lot of enrollment come into 4th. And so we can look at those pieces. And then 6th grade, there's a piece in the memo to the board we talked about a little bit there. And then in 7th grade, again, 0.3, this is a change of enrollment. It's not a shift there. Overall, same averages. You can see 20 to 29% of our students fall into the advanced tiers. In math, it's a little different. If you are in advanced math, you basically jump a grade is what happens. In middle school, if you're in the 90th percentile, the end of 5th, you're going to be able to jump. You have the option to jump again. And so our students in 90th and above can finish middle school taking geometry. Or every once in a while, we get a special circumstance where someone may be triple accelerated. Those students we send to Stevenson, but it's very rare. You're talking about less than 1% of your population we do that with. So, but that just to show why we have it broken out that way. Also, STAR likes to break it out this way as well. Okay, this diamond was because the board had shared with us that we want to make sure our kids are more than just one test score. There's more to our students. So these are 5 different ways we do measure our kids in general, and we think about how they're making progress. So that's just the graphic that we use. What I do want to talk about briefly is some of our next steps. So I mentioned to the board, and I think a couple of the oncoming members were in the audience, that we were kind of under we had to move quickly, let's put it that way, to get some funding spent. And so we were going to work out some of what that looked like afterwards, working with Marzano Resources. It's a great organization when you think about how do we build literacy capacity with all subgroups. So the group that they wrote, actually, I'm going to grab it. It's Dr. Berger's. So this is the recent book on it. So one of their newer initiative is Humanized Education, which essentially deals with kind of, I have the clicker, so I did the same thing. Deals with a lot of level 4 and 5, which is standards-based grading and competency-based learning, which is basically personalize the learning experience for every kid and what they need. So we've signed this 3-phased agreement. Dr. Mike Rules, the one that wrote this, he's got a team together. They're actually really excited about us, one, because they know we're awesome, but also they're excited to do a lot of action research with our district of like, let's find out what really works with a lot, especially when you have dual language programs and vocabulary. It's really built on these 3 concepts: mastery, growth, and strength. These are the sub areas. In July, we're going to meet as a group of an instructional leadership team to figure out what are our needs in these areas. Some of these things play into really what we're all about as a district. And then some of these things are going to leverage what we're good at to get better at some other areas. Access via literacy, pressing our kids, teacher optimism that we can push them to a certain place, working on our assessments that we use locally to give better feedback to our kids and to our families. So we will look at what are the areas we want to dive into, probably 1 or 2, and then we really will move forward with that. So that's just a little, this just explains where some of this will show up. And how it will show up. We're going to meet with the team. Dr. Knoll's going to get brought into that work here in a couple weeks as we talk through what this might look like for our district, but it's totally personalized. It's not someone coming with a canned program. It's what we really feel like are our needs as a district. We're very privileged to be able to do this. We're so small to get this type of attention. We're very excited. So the other piece I want to share with the board is that we are going to revise our tiers for next year. 30th percentile comes from when we were using MAP, which we stopped using in 2019 or 2018, excuse me. But then COVID happened and STAR did not renorm their tests to determine like what percentile means what for what kid. So they've just this year renormed it for the first time with this year's testing. So after our MTSS team met, we determined 25th, with the way that STAR does it, 25th percentile would be appropriate for tier 2 intervention. If you want to think of a grade equivalent, it means you're about 1 year behind is tier 2. Anybody that falls in between the 25th to 35th are typically in the same, they're within the grade level. They might be, just need some extra support. And those are things we typically can support in the classroom with our teacher and any interventions that support in. So in terms of providing targeted interventions, we're going to go to 25th. And we also have to think about this biliteracy thing and what that means for us and how we do. We've started these conversations. We're going to consider biliteracy when placing students, but we talked with DLS, for example, about this because they're kind of really at the beginning of our students' educational career and saying, well, if I don't service them, they still don't have the skill, but they're on track with their students. So we're walking through what does servicing look like. And Ms. Morley's been really integral to that conversation. So here's a graph. Again, we don't have Hanson making things look nice. So you get this, you get a circle and okay, you like, so not this, yes, this. So 26 and above will be considered tier 1. This is a local decision. It's a district decision. STAR has their own ways of doing it in terms of how they divide things up. So we landed this way. And then we show the board kind of 3 areas that at each of our meetings that we're working on moving forward. So we have summer exploration camp. Dr. Berger has done an outstanding job getting that organized. And Mr. Rogers worked closely at FSCS to ensure the afternoon pieces are happening. So our kids have full day summer camp. We talked about with the board last year that summer schools have been shown to be too short and too boring to actually have any real effect on students. We're trying to combat both of those with what we're doing. So really excited about that work. We're going to work with Humanized Education. These are the topics they've identified potentially to work on: assessment, standards-based report card, working on vocabulary, phonics, word study, and then we call a model of instruction. That's kind of educational jargon. A writing curriculum revision. We're going to work on that next year. That's up for revision. PLC manual development. Dr. Berger's been working on that. We're really excited about those pieces just to enshrine the work they've been doing. interventionists will start working with pre-K next year. That's going to be a change. So they're going to start even at that group with our early intervention students. That's something we've not done. We've always been totally play-based. So this will be a way that, hey, we're going to have fun at this station where we're going to talk about some pre-reading strategies. And I know that Robin and Sunny have been working on that. Our coaching cycles have been outstanding. We'll give an update on that at the 17th meeting, but there's some work that they're going to be doing. And then data-driven wise, our PLCs are driving everything. FastBridge, we're getting better at using. Our SPED and Tier 2 students are getting included in the classroom more, especially if it's a language, an issue of language. And then we talked about updating our tiers of support in our new curriculum. So, okay. Questions and comments?
There's a memo from Dr. Cunningham that was just recently added, but it explains some of the changes that have happened this year and some of the things that may have impacted some student growth, personnel related. So we wanted you to have that background information and details, so you can read through that at your leisure.
Okay. I just have two quick questions. In regards to the 5th grade, and I completely get the COVID stuff. I was curious to know if the data sort of nationally, also, because I know that from what you've just said that they haven't really updated, but is this something that, and I'm assuming it is not unique to our district, but is there any like more national data that supports that trend that this age group, wherever they were, that is there a little bit of a dip, or is that something that's more unique to us, which could very well be the case as well? It doesn't mean, I was just curious to know if there was more data nationally or even locally that supports that, given that those students were kindergartners at the time and just beginning their teaching, their learning formally. The other question that I had was just more of a clarifying question. The change in the tiers, I know that you've discussed the fact that there's a lot of push-in that's happening. So the students that might technically qualify for Tier 1, let's say they're in the 27th or 28th percentile, and they technically are in Tier 1, are those students still able to, when there might be an interventionist or somebody who is, let's say, in a whole group setting, be given a little bit of additional support? Again, this is just more clarifying.
That's a great question.
Because obviously 28th percentile is still not, maybe where we would ideally like the student to be. So I was just curious to know if, yes, they're technically within Tier 1, but are we also kind of looking at the whole picture to maybe make sure that, if they need just a little bit of support, that there is somebody there. So I hope I'm being clear.
It's a great question. STAR, it's become more that we're using it as really where do we stand against others versus are we going to use this to determine what skills kids are missing. So we just tried it this spring at WOAS. Instead of doing what we call this F&P BAS, it's this long reading assessment. We switched to something called Fast Track, where we're going to have every kid take it moving forward. And so a lot of the reading support, for example, we're grouping kids by what we see in those letters, if you will. And we're actually trying something at 3rd grade, for example, next year. We've aligned, Dr. Clips worked really hard with the BOT of that building to align all of our interventionists that are reading to be available. Now they're going to be pushing into the 3rd grade guided reading and writing blocks. So they have their own small group that they work with that are at those letters, if that makes sense, that they can provide those support. There's also not too many kids, ironically, that sit in the 27th to 30th. There's almost none. With our current data, they're either one or they're the other, if that makes sense too, which we looked at what will the impact be if we do this. And they were like, this actually will not change any of our loads right now with how it sits. So that was another reason we kind of made that decision. But between basically, we are trying to triangulate have three measures essentially for every kid that we're working with. It's STAR, it's Fast Bridge, and then the third measure can be a couple different things. It could be F&P, it could be like, if it's Spanish, it could be Apple or something. A lot of times it's a teacher's assessment or a local assessment is the third, and sometimes it's two Fast Bridge measures. So we'll target student support that way. So teachers felt a little bit better about that, knowing that we're not going to cut the conversation off if they're 26th percentile. Really, for the purposes of us sharing with the board, we're going to share it at that range, but we have kids that are being supported that are above. Yeah. And then the other question in terms of, do we see that trend nationally? It's yes and no. I was actually just peeking at the dual language study, looking at the growth for English speakers. English speakers, their growth percentile drops 4th to 5th. Spanish, it goes up a little bit. That being said, we felt like our data was a local thing that we can work on in our own district with we can support that at the grade level, if that makes sense, because we felt it was our Spanish speakers that were not showing as much growth when they nationally show a little bit more, while the English, like a little bit higher growth percentile, if you will, versus English. So that told us, yes, could we say it's a trend? Sure, but trends can tell us a lot of things, but we still want to do right, obviously, by our kids. So we felt like we need to make some shifts, and Vanessa came in to support some things on the Spanish side more aggressively, and we'll continue to do that with that grade because we really feel like we have great teachers there. We can see stronger growth that we want to see, but yes, nationally, it's somewhat supported.
So my district does map testing, and if a student comes to the test that day and has a terrible cold and is coughing and isn't focused and their score plummets, they can't retake it really. They don't allow it, it seems. Does STAR let you take that kid whose score is unusually different and retake it?
STAR gives it totally as a local decision. So you just walked into the middle of a debate we're having right now. So I don't know if you want to comment on this, Dr. Berger, or not.
Yes, STAR will allow you to do a retake.
That's her comment. Okay.
With,
So
like,
if you
with-
look at it by
within
time,
reason, like within reason, your discretion, like.
Yes, and
Anybody who wants to like redo it can redo it.
yeah, it's not just anyone who says, can I get a retake? It certainly doesn't work like that. But it was like we were talking about in the winter. It was that timepiece when I went and ran that report, and it's like the score is way off. And now I'm also seeing that the child only spent 4 minutes and 14 seconds to answer 42 questions. It's not even possible. So yes, when we know that it's not a normal score and there's other factors such as sick or rushing or something like that, yes, we will allow them to retake it.
And then the newcomer group, do they take the STAR test? Like if they don't speak English fluently and they're taking it in English, I can't imagine their scores look very good. So what value is it to give that and have it reflect in our tier 3 data then? I'm sure they're tier 3 then.
Mhm.
What is the value of them taking it if we know that they're tier 3?
it allows us to see, I guess, fortunately for us, a lot of them are Spanish speaker newcomers, so we can test them in Spanish math and Spanish reading. So a lot of times we use it as a comparison to see, is it a reading deficit or a function of language? So if they score 5th percentile in English reading, but then 50th in Spanish. For example, we actually had a kid that just came in from Colombia that was 99th in Spanish, and he's tier 3 in English. So that tells us. So that's a huge piece of why we do it. Also, it doesn't count in the state metrics. So it's really just a local for us to find out.
The STAR could be in Spanish as well. So what about your Ukrainian student who comes?
Right, that we can't accommodate. So other languages you can't. So there are some tools we've started to explore. There's one we're using called Magma Math right now. It's a lot of fun where you can throw it into any language you want for the
What
students to
about
do.
taking those students who our newcomers out of the, just for our sake, like out of the equation and seeing what our data looks like then?
If the board wants.
Well, I think there's a couple of pieces to it though. When those students who are non-English speakers, let's say who come from Ukraine, they can't take the Spanish test. And let's say, yes, they're in the first percentile at the start of the year. Those are some of your children that are gonna make the greatest growth at the fastest pace. So they've gone all of a sudden from the 1st to the 15th. Now, for us, it's like, well, of course, we want every single child in tier 1. I'm doing cartwheels down the hall when they've already made it to tier 2 in a matter of 3 months. So I think it goes kind of both ways, because of course you always want a higher number, more students in tier 1, all of that. But when we look at these percentages, it's like I said before, it's looking at that raw score and any sort of score increase to show that that child has grown in some way. So those students are a huge part of that 95, 100% growth that you're seeing in a lot of the categories.
Yeah, that's good.
And you guys had mentioned the triangulation but with these new students, then access.
Yeah.
Would
Mhm.
also show, like you're talking about growth, and that's huge because when they get here, they don't know, but it's a good base point, and then you're able to triangulate and even add a 4th score in there.
No, it's a great one. Like I said, we've tried this product, Fast Flashlight 360. There's one of the many products out there to help with access that benchmarks them as well. And so that tells us how they're making their progress to proficiency, because STAR it has its limits. It does. And we've been working, to Dr. Berger's point, we've also been working, it doesn't work for all students, but we've been working with a lot of our students on taking tests and thinking the way the test wants them to think.
Mhm.
And for some of our students, it's very beneficial. In fact, I was looking at some of our biggest growers tonight. One of them, I remember sitting with him and his reading interventionist. He was stuck in the 25th. Teacher was like, that's not accurate. Parents were like, it's not accurate. They changed some things in the test conditions and the student jumped to the 75th. But they've been sitting in the 25th for years until we started addressing something with test conditions, prep, or the way they approach it. Now, that's not the story for everybody, but we are finding, especially the upper grades, the vocabulary of taking the test matters. And if you're not using some of that terminology outside of school, we have to be very explicit in school to do it. And I'll give it to the teachers on that one. They did a great job. But
I have a quick question about, well, maybe it's not so quick, but could you explain more about the report card reform that they're considering doing, and like what tests are given that are reported as part of our report card? And for example, like would those new students that are having to take a test in English, is that any part of like the new equation for the report card reform? Like, do they take into consideration they've only had X amount of years of instruction in English, even though they're at this level? I don't know. Do you know how in-depth they're going to be with it?
yeah, and somebody stop me if I'm quoting this wrong, but typically they don't, if you're within your first year as a newcomer, they will not count you. But after that, you go live with it. The national government one national group that's affiliated with the Department of Ed, or used to be affiliated with the Department of Ed, would argue that newcomers 3 years. But we in Illinois have kind of treated it if you're within your first year, your test does not count. But beyond that, it will start counting, which can be very tough, especially at older grades. If you're a newcomer, not strongly literate in your home language, coming into higher level English, that can be very difficult. What the state's doing now is Tony's got a group Tony, like I know him, Tony. Some people do actually.
No.
Dr. Sherman, Dr. Berger do know Tony. Yes, he has, but I'm not allowed. No, I'm not calling him up, but okay. Yes, Tony Sanders, the state superintendent. So he is working with a group of teachers this summer in August to try to renorm. Now, because he's doing it and he's trying to make it happen for this fall, which means he already kind of knows what he wants. And so he's going to work with teachers to get a green light on it. And so he's going to change basically, for example, one of our students might score 220 in reading, which means all kinds of different things. But that may not have been proficient before, but now they're going to say a 215 is proficient. And so what that will do is it will probably raise our IR scores, which is what realtors and everybody sees is just that number. Context doesn't really matter. It's just that. And so will it raise ours? It should. It will also raise just about everybody else's, but it should raise ours. And that will make tests like MAP and STAR more accurate, because a lot of curriculum directors have criticized MAP and STAR for being poor predictors of IER, because Illinois' test is so much harder than those tests are. Some cases they're very accurate, but in some like for us, it's about a 15 to 20% difference. I can take the STAR test, subtract 20%, and that'll give me pretty accurately what our kids are going to do in IER. So yeah, that's basically what he's doing. Because I can see the raw scores now, but I can't see the percentiles this year because they don't know what they're going to be. They don't know if that's a proficient score or not. Oh, and sorry, and they use the Illinois Science Assessment for us, 5th and 8th grade, that counts. Attendance counts a lot, that means that DLS is totally dependent on attendance, which is usually the school you don't want dependent on attendance because of their primary at that level, especially kindergarten and pre-K, but that's all they really can control. They're also scored on 3rd grade's proficiency and 4th grade's growth. So DLS has one measure that really plays into their report card.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Any other questions? No. All right, thank you for all of that information. Thanks for synthesizing that for us. It's not easy. All right, well, let's move on then to our business agenda. We've got 1 item for review and 2 for action. The first for review is the omnibus vote agenda. And then do we just move on to the action one? Okay, so the action ones are, we've got a personnel, we've got 3 new hires. Where's the resolution? Okay, and then just read it. Okay. So be it resolved, the Diamond Lake 76 Board of Education accepts and approves the personnel items as depicted on the agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
Still getting used to everybody's voices. Mr. Becker? Yes. Ms. Holland? Yes. Ms. Bayless? Yes. Ms. Crutchfield? Yes. Ms. Reyes?
Oh,
Ms.
okay.
Self?
Oh, yes, sorry. I'm really good at this. Okay, and then, the next one is gonna be our, approve, resolution to designate interest earnings for the fiscal year. Did you want to say anything about that? Okay.
Just to give us blanket authorization.
To move that money around into different funds.
Prior, so.
Okay, great. So be it resolved that the Diamond Lake 76 Board of Education accepts and approves the designation of interest earnings for the fiscal year 2024-25 as recommended. Can I please have a motion?
Ms. Bayless? Yes. Ms. Crutchfield? Yes. Mr. Becker? Yes. Ms. Holland? Yes. Ms. Reyes? Ms. Self?
Yes. Okay, and then moving on to board discussion. Did anyone have anything they want to discuss? Oh, great.
And just add our alternate in the system.
Great, thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. Yeah.
On the omnibus vote agenda, approval of treasurer's approval, I couldn't understand what that. I didn't see, yeah, I think that's what, Mr. Rogers, I think that's what you were
Approval of
I think that's what you were. Yeah.
I think it maybe historically that I just have to see logistically what the omnibus vote motion says, but it will not present for the second one.
I was just trying to. Okay.
Yeah, why you don't see one in there is because it will be.
Okay. We don't have any freedom of information requests, notices and communications. We have some highlights. And do we have any public comments on non-agenda items? Anybody, Erin? No? Okay. All right, any others? No. Okay, anyways, all right, we're gonna move on and we are gonna be done. How do I say that? Adjourn?
Do you have a motion to
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Can we put me out of my misery?
Wait, who said it? Okay. I was like, gotta get Mr. Everett's voice. Okay, Mr. Becker? Ms. Reyes? Ms. Bayless, yes. Ms. Crutchfield? Ms. Holland? Ms. Sullivan?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you.